The morning I found the notice taped to my front door. I was already running late for work, and the last thing I needed was another one of Patricia Coleman's ridiculous demands, typed up in her signature aggressive font. But there it was, flapping in the February wind like a little flag of suburban tyranny, informing me that my snow removal technique violated Section 14.3 of the revised Meadowbrook Estates HOA Handbook. I yanked the paper off my door and scanned it while my coffee went cold in my other hand. Apparently, my method of clearing snow from my driveway and walkway was creating unsightly patterns visible from the street, which diminished the aesthetic appeal of the neighborhood. The notice demanded I clear snow in horizontal lines, perpendicular to the street, no diagonal patterns permitted, and all snow must be deposited in designated areas at the rear corners of the property only. My name is Alex Yardley, and I had lived in this God-forsaken subdivision outside Columbus, Ohio, for exactly 8 months. 8 months of constant notices. 8 months of Patricia Coleman prowling the streets in her white Lexus looking for violations. 8 months of questioning every single life choice that led me to buying a house in a place with a homeowner association. But this notice, this absurd, controlling, micromanaging piece of paper, was the one that finally broke something inside me. I crumpled the notice and shoved it in my coat pocket, climbed into my truck, and headed to work at the engineering firm downtown. The whole drive, I kept thinking about that notice. We had gotten 6 inches of snow the night before, with another 8 to 10 forecasted for the weekend. Patricia was really going to inspect my snow-clearing pattern. The woman had nothing better to do than police how I shoveled my driveway. My coworker Marcus noticed my foul mood the second I walked into the office. "Let me guess," he said, not looking up from his computer screen. "HOA, she wants to dictate how I shovel snow now," I said, dropping into my chair. "Horizontal lines only, perpendicular to the street." Marcus finally looked up, his eyebrows raised. "That cannot be real." I pulled out the crumpled notice and smoothed it on his desk. He read it, his expression moving from disbelief to amusement to something like anger. "This is insane. How is this even enforceable?" The handbook apparently got revised in December. Emergency meeting I did not attend because I was visiting my parents for Christmas. They voted in about 40 new rules. I grabbed the notice back and read the last paragraph again. "Failure to comply will result in a $500 fine for first offense, increasing by $500 for each subsequent violation." Can they even do that? According to my lawyer cousin, unfortunately, yes. I signed the HOA agreement when I bought the house. They can pretty much make any rule they want as long as it gets voted in at a meeting. Marcus shook his head. "What are you going to do?" That was the question. What was I going to do? I could comply like a good little homeowner and shovel my snow in Patricia's approved pattern. I could ignore it and pay the fines. Or I could do something else entirely. An idea was forming in the back of my mind, something petty and childish and absolutely perfect. The Meadowbrook Estates HOA had a logo. It was this pretentious little crest thing with 2 oak trees flanking a banner that read "Excellence in Community Living" in fancy script. Patricia had that logo on everything. Her letterhead, her email signature, the sign at the neighborhood entrance, even embroidered on the polo shirts she wore to HOA meetings. By the time I left work that evening, the idea had fully formed. The weekend storm was supposed to hit Friday night and continue through Saturday. I would wait for it to finish, and then I would clear my snow in a pattern all right. A very specific pattern. Friday evening arrived with heavy clouds and dropping temperatures. I stopped at the hardware store on my way home and picked up two things I did not normally use for snow removal: a can of bright orange spray paint and a cheap laser measuring device. The cashier gave me a curious look, but said nothing. The snow started around 7. Big, heavy flakes that accumulated fast. I sat in my living room window and watched it come down, watched it cover my driveway and walkway and front yard in a thick, pristine blanket. Around 10, I saw Patricia's Lexus cruise slowly down the street, her headlights illuminating the falling snow. Probably making notes on whose Christmas lights were still up in February. Mine were, but that was a battle for another day. By Saturday morning, we had gotten a solid 10 inches. The snow had stopped around dawn, leaving everything under a perfect white cover. I made breakfast, drank 2 cups of coffee, and then got to work on the most elaborate and ridiculous project I had ever undertaken. First, I needed a template. I pulled up the HOA logo on my computer and spent an hour with design software, simplifying it into something I could actually recreate in snow. I removed the small details, kept the basic shapes: 2 trees, a banner, the text. I printed out a scaled version, did the math on sizing it to fit my driveway and front walkway, then headed outside. The morning was cold and clear. A few neighbors were already out clearing their driveways in presumably HOA-approved patterns. I grabbed my shovel, the spray paint, and the measuring device and started laying out guidelines. Using the spray paint, I marked key points in the snow where major elements of the logo would be. From the street, the orange dots looked random. From my second-floor bathroom window, they made perfect sense. Then came the actual snow removal. This was going to take hours. I started with the outline of the left oak tree, carefully clearing snow in the shape of a trunk and branches. The cleared pavement was dark against the white snow, creating contrast. Pile by pile, shovelful by shovelful, I moved snow from specific areas and left it in others, sculpting the HOA logo into my front property. Mrs. Henderson from next door came over around noon. She was in her 70s, a nice woman who had lived here 20 years and mostly ignored Patricia's nonsense. "Alex, dear, what on earth are you doing?" Following HOA guidelines, Mrs. Henderson, clearing my snow in a specific pattern. She peered at my driveway, which at this point just looked like random cleared patches. "That does not look like horizontal lines to me." "Well, I am not quite finished yet." I kept shoveling, working on the right side oak tree now. She watched for another minute, then shook her head and shuffled back to her house. I heard her tell her husband that the HOA had finally driven me crazy. By 2 in the afternoon, my back was killing me and I was only about 60% done. The trees were finished, looking decent. Now I was working on the banner that curved between them. This was the tricky part, getting the curve right with straight shovel edges. I had to step back every few minutes, run upstairs to check the view from my bathroom window, then come back down and adjust. Marcus texted me around 3 asking if I wanted to catch a basketball game at the bar. I sent him a picture of my driveway in progress. He called immediately. "Dude, is that what I think it is?" The Meadowbrook Estates HOA logo, recreated in snow removal. Or it will be when I am done. He was laughing so hard he could barely talk. "You are insane. Patricia is going to lose her mind." That is the idea. I was working on the text now, the words "excellence in community living." This was tedious, clearing out letters in block form so they would be readable from the street. My shoulders ached and my hands were cramping even through my gloves, but I was committed now. "I am coming over," Marcus said. "This I have to see in person." He showed up around 4 with his girlfriend, and by then I was putting the finishing touches on the final letters. They stood at the end of my driveway, looking at the full picture, and Marcus just started laughing again. His girlfriend, Sarah, covered her mouth with her hand. "It is perfect," Marcus said. "It is absolutely perfect." "Does it look like the logo?" I asked. "Like, is it recognizable?" Sarah pulled out her phone and looked up the Meadowbrook Estates website. She held the phone up, comparing the logo on the screen to my snow art. "It is pretty much identical. This is the best petty revenge I have ever seen." We stood there admiring my work for a few minutes. The logo was huge, taking up my entire driveway and front walkway, visible from anywhere on the street. The cleared sections formed the image in dark contrast against the white snow. It must have taken me 7 hours total. "How long before Patricia sees it?" Marcus asked. "I give it until tomorrow morning. She does not usually patrol on Saturday evenings." I was wrong. Patricia showed up at 6:30, just as Marcus and Sarah were leaving. I was inside, finally warming up and nursing my aching muscles, when I heard the doorbell. More accurately, I heard the doorbell ring 6 times in rapid succession, the way someone rings when they are extremely angry. I looked out the window. The white Lexus sat in front of my house, driver door open, engine running. Patricia was on my porch, her finger pressed to the doorbell again. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Patricia Coleman was exactly what you would picture when you imagine an HOA president who makes everyone's life miserable. She was probably in her mid-50s, with that specific haircut that seems to be standard issue for women who want to speak to managers. She wore a puffy winter coat and boots that probably cost more than my mortgage payment, and her face was red with anger or cold or both. "What?" she said, her voice shaking. "Is that my driveway?" I said calmly. "I cleared the snow just like your notice demanded." "That is not what the notice demanded, and you know it." She thrust her phone at me. On the screen was a photo of my driveway. She had already documented it. "This is a mockery of the HOA. It is a tribute to the HOA. That is your logo, is it not? I thought it showed community spirit." Her mouth opened and closed a few times. "You cleared the snow in the shape of our logo." "That is correct. You demanded I clear snow in a specific pattern." "You did not specify which pattern. I chose one that honors our community." The notice clearly specified horizontal lines perpendicular to the street. "I must have misread it," I said, keeping my tone innocent. "I thought it said to create a pattern that would enhance the aesthetic appeal of the neighborhood. And what better pattern than our HOA logo? It is really quite attractive." Patricia's face was getting redder. "This is a violation, a clear violation. You will be fined." "For what exactly?" "I cleared my snow. There is a walkable path from my driveway to my front door. No snow is piled on the street or blocking any sidewalks. I followed your directive to deposit snow at the rear corners of my property." This was true. All the snow I had removed had been wheelbarrowed to those specific spots. It had added 2 hours to the project. "I do not see what rule I violated." "You know exactly what you did." She lowered her phone and stepped closer. "I have dealt with homeowners like you before. You think you are clever. You think you can make a joke out of our community standards. But I will tell you what is going to happen. You are going to go back outside right now and clear that driveway properly, or you will face the maximum fine allowed under our bylaws." "And what is the maximum fine?" "For willful mockery of HOA standards, up to $5,000. I actually laughed. I could not help it. $5,000 for clearing my snow in a creative pattern. Please, by all means, levy that fine. I would love to see you explain that to a judge." Her eyes narrowed. "You would take this to court?" "Absolutely. In fact, I encourage you to fine me, because then I get to stand in front of a judge and explain that I was fined thousands of dollars for clearing snow from my property in the shape of the HOA logo." The same HOA that demanded I clear snow in a specific pattern, but did not actually specify the pattern beyond perpendicular to the street, which, if you look closely, several elements of my design actually are. I had made sure of this. The banner was roughly perpendicular. I think it would make a great news story, do not you? HOA president fines homeowner for snow art. Patricia stared at me for a long moment. Behind her, the Lexus was still running, exhaust puffing into the cold air. "This is not over," she finally said. "Emergency HOA meeting tomorrow afternoon at 4. You will be there. Would not miss it." She stalked back to her car and peeled out, which was hard to do on a snowy street, but she managed it. I closed the door and realized I was shaking slightly, adrenaline dumping into my system. But I was also grinning. This was the most fun I had had since moving to this neighborhood. I took photos of my handiwork from every angle as the sun set, just in case Patricia tried to claim I had done something different. Then I posted them to the Meadowbrook Estates Facebook group with the caption, "Showing community spirit by incorporating our beautiful HOA logo into my snow removal. Pride and excellence in community living." The Facebook group exploded. Within an hour, I had 50 comments. Half were from people laughing and congratulating me on the creativity. The other half were from Patricia's friends calling me disrespectful and demanding I remove it immediately. Several neighbors came by to look at it in person. Mrs. Henderson brought her husband, who took photos, and said it was the funniest thing he had seen all year. One neighbor, a guy named Tom who lived 3 houses down, knocked on my door around 9. "Hey man, I just wanted to say that is hilarious. Patricia has been out of control lately and someone needed to push back. She tried to fine me last month because my trash cans were visible from the street for more than 12 hours. They were out for 13 hours. What did you do?" "Paid the fine. $50. It was not worth the fight." He looked back at my driveway. "But maybe it should have been. Do you really think you can beat this?" "I have no idea, but I am going to try." Sunday morning brought fresh snow, just a dusting, which actually made my logo look even better. The light layer of new snow settled on the cleared, dark areas, creating a slightly three-dimensional effect. I took more photos. The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for 4 p.m. at Patricia's house. She lived in one of the bigger homes in the development, a sprawling colonial that probably violated several of her own rules about proportionality and yard space. I showed up at 3:58 wearing jeans and my most worn-out coat. If Patricia wanted formal, she was not getting it from me. About 20 people were crammed into her living room, sitting on expensive furniture that looked like it had never actually been used. I recognized most of them. Patricia sat at the front in a wing-back chair like a throne. Her best friend Linda sat beside her, along with 2 other HOA board members whose names I could never remember. Patricia called the meeting to order by tapping a pen on a clipboard. "We are here to address a serious violation of community standards by Alex Yardley. As you all know by now, Mr. Yardley has chosen to mock our HOA by clearing his snow in an inappropriate pattern. I cleared it in the shape of our logo," I said from the back of the room. "How is that mocking?" The intent was clearly to make a joke of our standards. The intent was to show community pride. I created art celebrating our neighborhood. Most HOAs would be thrilled. Linda spoke up. "No one believes that was your intent. We all saw your Facebook post." The tone was sarcastic. I wrote that I was showing community spirit. Those were my exact words. An older man I did not know raised his hand. "Actually, I have a question. What rule did he break exactly? I have been reading the handbook and I cannot find anything that says you cannot clear snow in patterns." Patricia flipped through papers on her clipboard. Section 14.3 states that snow removal must be conducted in a manner consistent with neighborhood aesthetics and standards. And I did that, I said. I cleared my snow in a beautiful, elaborate pattern featuring our community logo. What is more consistent with neighborhood standards than literally depicting those standards in frozen water art? A few people laughed. Patricia's face tightened. The spirit of the rule is clear. Snow removal should be practical and neat, not ostentatious displays. The rule does not say that, though, the older man said. He stood up and I recognized him as Bill from the neighborhood entrance. It says consistent with aesthetics and standards. The HOA logo is our standard. Seems to me he followed the rule. Patricia stood up too. This is not a debate. The board has decided to levy a fine of $2,000 for this violation. On what grounds? I asked. Which specific rule in the handbook did I violate? Give me the exact language. She glared at me. I just told you, Section 14.3, which I followed. So you are fining me for following the rules in a way you personally do not like. That is abuse of HOA power, and I will absolutely take this to court. Go ahead, Patricia snapped. We have legal authority to maintain community standards. No judge will side with you. Want to bet? Because I have already spoken to a lawyer. This was a lie, but I was committed now. HOA regulations have to be specific and reasonable. You cannot fine people for vague violations of aesthetic standards you personally define. That is arbitrary and capricious, and courts have repeatedly ruled against HOAs in these situations. The room was silent. Bill spoke up again. I think we should table this. Maybe revise the handbook to be more specific about what patterns are acceptable. I second that, someone else said. Patricia looked around the room and seemed to realize she was losing control of the meeting. Fine. We will table the fine pending handbook revision. But Mr. Yardley, you are on notice. Any future violations will be dealt with severely. Looking forward to it, I said. The meeting broke up after that. Several people came up to me privately and said they supported what I was doing. Mrs. Henderson told me to keep fighting because Patricia had been a tyrant for years. Bill invited me to get a beer sometime and talk strategy. But as I walked back to my house in the dark, I realized this was not over, not even close. Patricia was not the type to let this go. She would find a way to retaliate, to punish me for embarrassing her. I needed to be ready. The next morning, Monday, I got up early and checked my driveway. The logo was still there, though starting to get a bit trampled from walking on it. I had used my driveway normally all weekend, which was the point. It was both art and functional. At work, I actually did call my cousin, who was a lawyer. His name was David and he practiced civil law in Cleveland. I explained the situation and he laughed for about 5 minutes straight. That is the best thing I have heard all month, he said. Yeah, you are probably fine legally. HOA rules have to be clear and specific. If they try to fine you for following a rule in a creative way, you have grounds to fight it. But Alex, be careful. HOAs can make your life hell. They can nickel and dime you with violations until you go crazy. I know, but I am tired of living under Patricia Coleman's thumb. Someone has to stand up to her. Then stand up smart, document everything, every interaction, every notice, every violation, dates, times, photos. If this goes legal, you want a paper trail. I took his advice seriously. That evening, I created a folder on my computer labeled HOA documentation and started a spreadsheet. I logged every notice Patricia had given me since I moved in. The one about my grass being a 1/4 inch too tall. The one about my mailbox flag being the wrong shade of red. The one about parking my truck in the driveway instead of the garage. 14 notices in 8 months, some reasonable, most absurd. Tuesday brought a new development. I found another notice on my door, but this one was different. It informed me that the HOA board had called for a special assessment vote. All homeowners would be required to pay an additional fee of $300 to cover legal expenses related to enforcing community standards. The vote would happen at next month's regular meeting. I read it 3 times. A special assessment just for legal fees right after our confrontation. This was absolutely retaliation. Patricia was going to make everyone pay extra money and blame it on me for challenging her authority. I posted a photo of the notice to the Facebook group with a detailed explanation. I pointed out the timing, noted that this legal fee assessment came right after Patricia threatened to fine me, and suggested that maybe the HOA did not need to spend money on lawyers if the board stopped trying to fine people for ridiculous violations. The response was immediate and divided. Some people agreed with me, saying Patricia had gone too far. Others blamed me for causing trouble and costing everyone money. A woman named Deborah commented that I should just follow the rules and none of this would be necessary. I replied asking which rule I had broken, and she did not answer. Wednesday evening, I got home from work to find Patricia's Lexus parked in front of my house again. She was sitting in it, engine running, just watching my house. When I pulled into my driveway, she got out and approached me. "Mr. Yardley, we need to talk." "About what?" "Your social media posts. You are creating discord in our community." "I am pointing out facts. You threatened to fine me, and now suddenly we need a special assessment for legal fees. That is not discord, that is cause and effect. You are encouraging homeowners to question the board's authority. Maybe the board's authority should be questioned if it is being abused." She stepped closer, her breath fogging in the cold air. "I am going to give you one chance to make this right. Remove your Facebook posts. Apologize to the board publicly. Pay a voluntary fine of $500 for the snow incident. Do that, and we will call off the special assessment." I stared at her. "So you are admitting the assessment is retaliation? I am offering you a way out of the situation you created." I created. "Patricia, you are the one who sent me a notice demanding I clear snow in a specific pattern. I did exactly that. Then you tried to fine me for following your directive in a way you did not like. Now you are trying to charge everyone in the neighborhood extra money to pay for your wounded pride." "I am not the problem here." $500, she repeated, "and an apology, or this gets much worse for you." "How exactly could it get worse? You going to fine me for the color of my curtains, the brand of my doormat? Be careful, Mr. Yardley. I have been president of this HOA for 12 years. I know every loophole, every rule, every way to make a non-compliant homeowner's life miserable. You do not want to test me. Actually, I think I do." I walked past her toward my front door. "Have a good evening, Patricia." She stood in my driveway for another minute, then got in her Lexus and drove away. My hands were shaking again. This was escalating beyond what I had anticipated. Patricia was not just annoyed anymore. She was angry, and she was determined to punish me. I called David again that night and told him about the confrontation. He whistled low. "That is basically extortion. She offered to drop a retaliatory assessment if you pay money and apologize. Alex, you need to record these interactions. If she threatens you again, get it on video or audio." "Is that legal in Ohio?" Ohio is a one-party consent state. As long as you are part of the conversation, you can record it without telling her. Do it. This woman sounds unhinged. The next day, Thursday, I stopped at an electronics store and bought a small body camera. The kind police officers wear. It was expensive, but David was right. I needed documentation. Friday brought the next escalation. I received 3 notices on my door. One for parking my truck in the driveway overnight, which apparently violated a rule I had never seen before. One for having a snow shovel visible on my front porch, which was deemed unsightly. And one for excessive window coverings, because I had closed my blinds the night before. 3 notices in one day, all for things I had been doing since I moved in without any problem. This was Patricia's retaliation, exactly as she had promised. She was going to bury me in petty violations. I photographed all 3 notices, logged them in my spreadsheet, and posted them to Facebook. This time, the response was overwhelmingly in my support. Even people who had defended Patricia before were starting to question her. Tom from down the street commented that he had also received 2 notices that day for things that had never been violations before. Another neighbor, a woman named Jennifer, posted that she had gotten a notice for having decorative rocks in her garden instead of mulch. Someone else got dinged for having a welcome mat that was green instead of brown or black. Patricia was lashing out at everyone she suspected of supporting me. That evening there was a knock on my door. I checked the peephole and saw Mrs. Henderson. I opened it and she came in quickly, looking nervous. "Alex, dear, I need to tell you something. Patricia came to my house today. She asked me questions about you. What hours you keep, if you have guests over, if you follow other rules she might not have noticed yet. She is looking for more violations." "Yes, and she told me that anyone who publicly supports you will receive extra scrutiny from the board. She is trying to isolate you, make sure no one helps you fight this." I thanked Mrs. Henderson and she hurried back home. The situation was spiraling. Patricia was now actively investigating me, looking for anything she could use, and she was intimidating other homeowners into staying silent. I spent Friday night going through the HOA handbook page by page, making notes on every rule, looking for anything I might be violating. The handbook was 87 pages long, dense with regulations about everything from acceptable paint colors to the maximum height of backyard fences. It was impossible to follow every rule perfectly. No one could, which was exactly the point. Patricia could find violations on anyone if she looked hard enough. Saturday morning, I woke up to find my truck had been towed, just gone from my driveway. I called the towing company listed on the sign at the neighborhood entrance, and they told me my vehicle had been removed at the request of the HOA for overnight parking violations. It was at an impound lot 20 miles away, and I would owe $400 in fees to get it back. I lost my temper. I called Patricia directly, her cell phone number listed as the HOA contact. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Hello, you had my truck towed. Your vehicle was parked in violation of HOA rules. The handbook clearly states that all vehicles must be garaged overnight unless alternative parking is approved in writing by the board. That rule has never been enforced. Half the neighborhood parks in their driveways. The rule exists. You violated it. Your truck was towed per our agreement with the towing company. This is harassment, Patricia. You are targeting me specifically because I embarrassed you. I am enforcing the rules equally for all homeowners. If others are also in violation, they will be addressed as well. Now, if you would like to discuss the compromise I offered earlier, my door is open. Otherwise, I suggest you read the handbook more carefully." She hung up. I stood in my empty driveway, furious and helpless. $400 to get my truck back. 3 notices yesterday. A special assessment coming. Patricia was grinding me down systematically. I put on my body camera, called a ride share to take me to the impound lot, and spent the morning getting my truck back. The impound lot owner was sympathetic when I explained the situation. HOAs are brutal, man. I get cars from them all the time. It is a racket, honestly. By the time I got home, it was early afternoon. Marcus texted asking if I wanted to watch college basketball. I told him what happened and he offered to come over instead. He showed up with beer and Chinese food and we sat in my living room discussing options. "Can you just move?" he asked. "Like sell the house and get out of here? And let Patricia win?" "No way. Besides, I would have to disclose the HOA disputes to potential buyers. It would tank my property value." "So what are you going to do?" "I have been thinking about that. Patricia has been HOA president for 12 years, right? That means there have been elections, or there should have been. I need to check the bylaws about board elections." I pulled out my copy of the HOA bylaws, a separate document from the handbook. It took 20 minutes of reading, but I found it. Board elections were supposed to happen every 2 years. Board members could serve a maximum of 3 consecutive terms, meaning 6 years. Patricia had been president for 12 years. That was at least 1, possibly 2 terms beyond the legal maximum. "Holy shit," Marcus said when I showed him. "She has been on the board illegally. Maybe. I need to check the meeting minutes, see if there is something I am missing. Some exemption or rule change." I sent an email to the HOA board requesting copies of all meeting minutes for the past 12 years. It was technically public record for homeowners. Then I waited. Monday morning I got a response, not from Patricia, but from another board member named Gary. He said that meeting minutes were available for review by appointment only, and I could come to his house Wednesday evening to look at them. Wednesday could not come fast enough. I showed up at Gary's house at 7 p.m. with a notebook and my phone fully charged for taking photos. Gary was probably 60, a retired accountant who seemed uncomfortable with the whole situation. "Look," he said as he led me to his home office. "I am just on the board because my wife made me. Patricia does most of the actual work. I do not want any trouble. I am just here to review the minutes." He had them in 3-ring binders organized by year. I started with the most recent and worked backward. The past few years showed regular meetings, votes on rule changes, financial reports. But as I went back further, things got strange. 8 years ago, there was a note that the annual board election had been postponed due to low homeowner attendance at the meeting. 7 years ago, the same note. 6 years ago, a vote had been held to temporarily suspend term limits during a period of transition. But there was no record of that suspension ever being lifted. I took photos of every relevant page. "Gary, according to these minutes, Patricia should have been off the board 3 years ago when her 3rd term ended." Gary shifted uncomfortably. "Like I said, I just sign what she puts in front of me. That is not how an HOA board is supposed to work. You are all liable for these decisions. Are you going to sue?" "I might not have to." I kept photographing documents. "If the board is not following its own bylaws, that opens up every decision you have made to legal challenge. Every fine, every rule change, every vote." I left Gary's house with a phone full of evidence. This was bigger than snow patterns now. Patricia had essentially been running the HOA as her personal fiefdom for years, ignoring rules about elections and term limits. If I could prove she was operating without proper authority, every action she had taken could be invalidated. I called David immediately and sent him the photos. He called back an hour later, excited. "Alex, this is good. This is really good. If she has been serving beyond her term limits without a proper vote to extend them, she has no legal authority to levy fines or make rules. You could argue that every violation notice she has sent you is invalid. Can I force a new election? Better than that. You can demand one. HOA bylaws are legally binding. If they say elections happen every 2 years, they have to happen. and if they have not been happening, any homeowner can petition for one. You will need signatures from at least 10% of the homeowners, but based on what you have told me about the Facebook group, that should not be hard. I spent Thursday creating a petition. It called for an immediate board election in accordance with the bylaws, noting that the current board had exceeded term limits and failed to hold required elections. I needed signatures from at least 30 homeowners out of the 280 homes in Meadowbrook Estates. Friday evening, I started going door to door. I began with Mrs. Henderson, who signed immediately. Then Tom, who also signed and offered to help collect more signatures. Jennifer signed. Bill at the entrance signed. By Sunday afternoon, I had 47 signatures. I submitted the petition to the HOA board Monday morning, delivering it directly to Patricia's house. She answered the door in yoga pants and a sweatshirt, her hair in a ponytail. For once, she looked less than perfectly composed. What is this? A petition calling for immediate board elections as required by the bylaws. I have signatures from 47 homeowners, well above the required threshold. She flipped through the pages, her expression hardening. This is absurd. The board has been operating with full authority. No, it has not. You have exceeded your term limits by at least 3 years without a proper vote to extend them. That means every action you have taken in that time period is potentially invalid, including every fine you have levied against me. We suspended term limits during a transition period. That suspension was supposed to be temporary and requires a vote to lift. You never held that vote. I have the meeting minutes to prove it. Now, according to the bylaws, when a valid petition for elections is submitted, the board must schedule that election within 30 days. I will see you at the ballot box, Patricia. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing in her doorway holding the petition. My heart was racing. I had essentially just declared war on the HOA president, challenging her authority directly. There was no going back now. The next week was chaos. Patricia called an emergency board meeting to discuss the petition. I attended, camera recording. She argued that the petition was invalid on technicalities, that some signatures were not properly witnessed, that the bylaws about elections were outdated and needed revision before being enforced. But Bill was there too, and so were about 50 other homeowners. Bill stood up and said, according to the bylaws, a valid petition triggers mandatory elections. You cannot just ignore it. If you do, we can take this to the county and have the HOA dissolved for failing to follow its own governing documents. Patricia's face went white. Dissolving the HOA would mean all the rules, all the standards, all her control would disappear. Fine, she said tightly. We will hold elections in 30 days. February 20th. Nomination forms will be available on the HOA website. I filed my nomination form the next day to run for president. So did Bill. So did 3 other homeowners who were tired of Patricia's reign. Patricia obviously filed to keep her position. The campaign was intense. Patricia sent out a newsletter to all homeowners painting me as a troublemaker who disrespected community standards. I responded with my own letter detailing the illegal towing, the retaliatory violations, and the fact that she had been serving beyond her legal term. I created a Facebook event for a campaign meeting at my house. 30 people showed up. I laid out my platform: transparent governance, reasonable enforcement of rules, no more retaliation against homeowners, and a complete revision of the handbook to remove absurd regulations. Patricia held her own meeting, and from what I heard, spent most of it attacking me personally. She told people I was trying to destroy property values by allowing the neighborhood to become run down. She claimed I wanted to eliminate all rules and turn Meadowbrook Estates into a slum. The election was scheduled for a Saturday. Voting would happen at the community center from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. All homeowners in good standing could vote, 1 vote per household. The 5 board positions were on the ballot: president, vice president, treasurer, secretary, and member at large. I voted at 10:15. Patricia was there, watching everyone who came in, her expression tight and angry. Bill was there too, handing out flyers for his platform. The community center was packed all day. Results were announced at 5 p.m. They had to count paper ballots manually, which took time. The current board treasurer, a nervous woman named Helen, stood at the front of the room with the results. For the position of president, she read, her voice shaking slightly, Alex Yardley, 132 votes. Patricia Coleman, 98 votes. The room erupted. Some people cheered. Others looked shocked. Patricia stood frozen, her face pale. I had won. I was the new HOA president. Bill won the vice president position. 3 other reform-minded homeowners won the remaining positions. Patricia and her entire board had been voted out. Patricia left immediately, not waiting to hear the rest of the results. I saw her Lexus peel out of the parking lot through the window. I felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety. I had won the battle, but now I actually had to run the HOA. My first action as president was to call a board meeting for the following week. We met at the community center and went through the handbook page by page. We eliminated about 30 of the most absurd rules, including the one about snow removal patterns. We voted to rescind all fines that had been levied in the past 6 months, including the ones against me. We also voted to return the special assessment money that Patricia had collected. It turned out she had not actually hired any lawyers. She had just used the special assessment threat as intimidation. The money was refunded to all homeowners. Then came the hard part. We needed to investigate Patricia's management of HOA finances more thoroughly. I insisted we hire an independent accountant to review the books. Bill agreed. The accountant's report came back 2 weeks later, and it was devastating. Patricia had been taking unauthorized payments from the HOA account for years. Small amounts, usually categorized as reimbursements for supplies or services, but they added up. Over 12 years, she had taken nearly $60,000. I sat in my living room with the accountant's report and felt sick. This was not petty HOA drama anymore. This was embezzlement. This was a crime. I called David again. We have to report this to the police. Are you sure? Once you involve law enforcement, this becomes criminal. Patricia will be arrested if there is enough evidence. She stole $60,000 from the homeowners. We do not have a choice. I filed a report with the Columbus Police Department. A detective came to my house and took my statement. I provided him with the accountant's report, copies of bank statements showing the unauthorized withdrawals, and Patricia's own signatures on the reimbursement requests. 2 days later, police showed up at Patricia's house. I was not there, but several neighbors reported seeing her let out in handcuffs. She was charged with felony embezzlement and fraud. The story hit the local news. HOA president arrested for embezzling thousands. The news crew even came to Meadowbrook Estates and interviewed residents. Mrs. Henderson told them Patricia had been a tyrant for years and karma had finally caught up with her. I declined to comment on camera. Patricia's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal. The prosecutor was not interested. The evidence was too clear, too damning. She had literally signed her name to fraudulent reimbursement requests. The trial was in May. I attended every day, sitting in the back of the courtroom. Patricia looked smaller somehow, diminished. Her perfect hair was not as perfect. She wore simple clothes instead of her expensive outfits. The prosecution laid out the evidence methodically. Years of false reimbursement requests, HOA money paid into her personal accounts, checks written to fake vendors that were actually just her under different business names. She had created an entire system to siphon money from the association. Her defense was weak. She claimed the reimbursements were legitimate, that she had spent her own money on HOA business and was simply getting paid back. But she could not produce receipts or proof of these expenses. The jury did not buy it, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 4 years in prison and ordered her to pay back the full $60,000 plus damages. She would also never be allowed to serve on an HOA board again, a small detail that almost made me laugh. I watched her being led away after sentencing and felt no satisfaction, just exhaustion. This whole situation had spiraled so far beyond my petty Snow logo revenge. Patricia had destroyed her own life through years of corruption, but I had been the one to expose it. Life in Meadowbrook Estates slowly returned to normal. The new board worked on rebuilding trust with homeowners. We held monthly meetings that were actually open and transparent. We revised the handbook to be reasonable instead of authoritarian. We dealt with actual problems instead of inventing violations. The Snow logo was long gone, melted away with winter. But people still talked about it. It had become neighborhood legend. The Snow art that took down a corrupt HOA president. Marcus came over one evening in June and we sat on my porch drinking beer and watching the sun set. "So was it worth it?" he asked. "All the stress, the fight, everything." I thought about it. The confrontations with Patricia, the retaliatory violations, getting my truck towed. The election campaign, the trial, it had consumed 6 months of my life. "Yeah," I said finally. "It was worth it. Someone needed to stand up to her. I just happened to be the person who was mad enough about a snow removal notice to actually do it. All because she told you to clear snow in a specific pattern. All because she could not stand someone following her rules in a way she did not expect. That is what it came down to. Control. She needed to control everything, and when she could not control me, she escalated. And the escalation revealed all the other crimes she had been committing. We sat in comfortable silence for a while. Neighbors walked by walking dogs, pushing strollers, living their lives without constant harassment from an HOA president who saw violations everywhere. Mrs. Henderson came over the next day with a casserole and a card signed by about 20 neighbors. The card thanked me for standing up to Patricia and for serving as HOA president. The casserole was chicken and rice and actually delicious. "You did a good thing, Alex," she said. "That woman made all our lives harder for years. Someone finally stopped her." After she left, I sat with the card and felt something like closure. I had moved to Meadowbrook Estates 8 months ago looking for a quiet place to live. Instead, I had ended up in a war with an HOA president, exposed corruption, and completely changed the governance of my neighborhood. And it all started because I made a Snow logo to comply with a ridiculous notice about clearing patterns. I kept that original notice, the one that demanded I clear snow in horizontal lines perpendicular to the street. I framed it and hung it in my home office as a reminder. A reminder that sometimes the most absurd demands lead to the most important fights. A reminder that standing up to petty tyranny matters. A reminder that following rules in unexpected ways can expose the people who use those rules to abuse power. The following winter, we got another big snowstorm. I cleared my driveway in boring, practical straight lines. No logos, no patterns, no art. Just normal snow removal like a normal person. But I would be lying if I said I did not take a moment to appreciate the memory of that perfect February morning when my entire driveway looked like the Meadowbrook Estates HOA crest, and Patricia Coleman's face when she saw it. That moment of petty, perfect rebellion before everything escalated into something much bigger and more consequential. Sometimes you push back against something small and uncover something massive. Sometimes a fight about snow patterns leads to a federal trial. Sometimes the thing that seems silly and petty is actually the first domino in a long chain of consequences. I still live in Meadowbrook Estates. I served as HOA president for 2 years before stepping down, having done what I wanted to do, make the organization functional and fair. Bill took over after me and has done a good job maintaining the reforms we put in place. Patricia served 3 years of her sentence before being released on parole. I heard she moved to another state, trying to start over. I do not wish her ill, but I do not forgive her either. She had the power to make people's lives better and instead used it to make them miserable while enriching herself. That is a choice she made, repeatedly, for years. As for me, I learned some things. I learned that HOA boards need oversight and accountability. I learned that standing up to bullies, even suburban ones in white Lexuses, sometimes matters. I learned that a neighborhood works better when people cooperate instead of living in fear of violation notices. And I learned that if someone demands you do something in a specific pattern, and they are not actually specific about which pattern, well, you have some creative freedom. Sometimes you should use it. The story of the snow logo became neighborhood lore, told to new homeowners as a cautionary tale about the bad old days before the board reform. It became a reminder that residents have power if they choose to use it. It became a symbol of pushing back against petty tyranny. I never made another snow pattern. Once was enough, and it accomplished more than I ever imagined it would when I spent that cold Saturday carefully clearing snow in the shape of an HOA logo. I just wanted to be petty. I ended up starting a revolution. Looking back now, from the quiet normalcy of a functional HOA that actually serves its homeowners instead of terrorizing them, the whole thing seems almost surreal. 6 months of chaos sparked by a notice about snow removal. A corrupt president exposed and imprisoned. A complete change in neighborhood governance. And it all started because I got mad about being told how to shovel my driveway. Sometimes the smallest acts of rebellion lead to the biggest changes. Sometimes following instructions in an unexpected way reveals the truth about the people giving those instructions. Sometimes you clear snow in the shape of a logo and end up changing everything. And sometimes, on quiet winter mornings when the snow is falling and I need to clear my driveway, I stand there with my shovel and remember. Remember that once upon a time, I turned snow removal into art and revolution. Remember that Patricia's face when she saw it. Remember that sometimes you have to make people see the absurdity of their demands by complying with them in the most literal, creative way possible. The snow logo is gone, melted into memory and neighborhood legend. But what it represented, what it started, that remains. A community where people are not afraid of their HOA, where rules serve residents instead of controlling them, where a notice on your door is helpful information, not a threat, all because one February morning I decided to clear my snow in a very specific pattern. The best pattern I could think of. The pattern that said everything I needed to say without saying a word. The Meadowbrook Estates HOA logo, rendered in negative space on my driveway, visible from the street, beautiful and petty and perfect. That was where it all began. And this, finally, is where it ends.